Greetings, productive programmers. So now that we have this endpoint working the /stories and it's listing out just the currently logged in users' stories here. So test.test.com user can only see the post that they made. That's why we can see it's just title test.test.com and the second one for test.test.com. Those are the stories that we created that only the test user can see, the test.test.com user, I should say. And this user cannot see any of the other users' stories here in this list. But if we go back to our database, there is a story that's called to a new story as new at test.com. And that story is not being displayed here in their list. We're going to set it up so now that there's an endpoint that displays all of the user stories. So essentially what we want is medium.com. If we go to their home page, it lists out basically everybody's stories, right? So I can see multiple users' stories here on the home page. So we're going to create a home page that's very similar to that. And the way that we're going to do this, actually, before we started modifying this stories page, we pretty much had that working already, except that we could do some things that we shouldn't have been able to do, like edit other people's posts and so forth. So we're going to basically take this index page that we have here for the stories, and we're going to duplicate some of the logic, but we're in a simplified manner. So the way that we're going to do this is we're just going to go ahead and take this index.ex and this index.html heeks file. Let's just go ahead and copy and paste these. So I'm going to copy them, and then inside the story live folder, I will paste them. That'll create a copy of each one of these. And I'm just going to rename them. So I'm going to rename them to have a unified naming structure of home. So home.ex for our home module. And we'll change the heeks file here to be home.html.heeks. And then we'll have to do some cleanup here. So this home file here, that's going to be our home module, we have to rename it to be home. And since this is I said that this is going to be a simplified version, we're not going to need to do any of the editing or deleting or creating of new stories here. So we're actually going to just kind of clean up this structure. The only thing that we're going to need to do here is list out stories on our home page. So I can get rid of all of this logic essentially. So we just need to mount the page. And then when the page is mounted, we're going to list the stories. And let me just make sure that looks correct. Okay. So that should do it. And it says apply action is unused. Okay. Let's go ahead and let's see here. So it's using this handle params to apply action. So I'm going to just save that one. Okay. So handle params here calls apply action. So that's actually a little bit different now, I guess, in the way that Phoenix LiveView is structured. So used to be structured just slightly differently. So this is cool. We're seeing it, seeing a good use case here. So blog.stories, we don't need the logger anymore. That was just there to help us out when we were using it inside the index module. So this looks good. Now what we can do is if we go to the home HTML heeks, we can also clean this file up. We only need to list out the stories. So before we clean up the home HTML heeks, we can render this first and kind of work off of what it looks like to clean it up. So I'll just leave this for a minute. Let's make our home module actually load on the page by going to our router and changing it so that our publicly accessible home page here is no longer a page controller. So if we go to our home page now, we can see that it's this page. We're going to go ahead and turn that into our home page. So we're going to turn it into this home module here. And so the way that we do that is we just change this to be story live, and we're going to make it the home. And then we need to change this to be a live view. So this is not going to be a GET request endpoint. This is going to be a live endpoint. So if we do that, we should see this is going to be updated here. And it's thrown an error because it's saying that we're trying to access story for the current user. We can see here in the error. So let's go back to our home module here and just clean that up. So we don't need to, on our home page, since we're going to make this like medium.com and we can see everybody's stories, we don't need to filter this to just the logged in user here on the home page. So we can go back to using that list stories function here where we'll list all of the stories, not the ones that are just limited to the user. So we're going to just list all the stories. So we're not going to pass any parameters in here. And now if we come back here to our home page, let's see what kind of error we get here. Apply action. Okay, so apply action, trying to list the stories, and it's trying to assign story empty. So it is trying to apply the action of index. And if we look at our router is currently pointing to the home action. So if we come back here, we have two options. We could either change this in our router to point to the index. That would be fine. Or I'm thinking of this as being the home page though. So I'm just going to call this action home just to make it a little bit more distinct and unique, because our index module already uses the index. It's not that we can't reuse it because we're on a different route. It's just, why not make it something a little bit more unique? And I'm thinking of this as our home page. So now that that route is set up correctly to call the appropriate action, we can say that the page now loads, and it loads all of the user stories. So we are now here on the home page, and it's listing all of the user stories. And if we go to the /stories, then it lists just the user's stories. So we have these two endpoints working now. They're just actually a little bit confusing, I suppose. So let's make it a little bit clearer. So what we can do to make things just read a little bit more logically is we can first of all change it so the home page doesn't allow us to have these edit and delete endpoints. So what we can do is clean that up. So where we have our new story here, we don't need an action to be able to create stories. We can get rid of that. And what we can do is we can have something here at the top where it says list in stories. We could change this to be a title such as all users stories or something of that nature for now as a placeholder. And then our table here, we don't need to allow editing posts, so we can get rid of this. And then we can change this show story here to say read story. And then if we reload this page, that's not displaying yet. We can change it so that this link is available for this action here, where the delete one is displaying. We'll get rid of the delete one, and we can just get rid of this code. And now if we come back to our story, we are presented with the read option. And then if we click into it, it'll allow us to come to this page here where we're going to modify that and make it so we can read our story. All right, so that's looking pretty good. And we're not making use of this module here, which is the one that's going to allow us to create a new story. So we're just displaying our stories. So we're just cleaning this code up to have an area where we list all of the stories. That's all we're doing here. And then if we click in here to read a story, let's just go ahead. That's going to be this show module here. That's where, if we look at our router, that is where that show module is being assigned to. It's being assigned to these routes where you pass the stories ID. So that's what we have here, stories ID. So it's bringing us to this route, this show module. And this show module also allows us to edit it. So if we were to come in here to stories ID show /edit, we can edit it. That's what this endpoint is triggering. So what I'm going to do is we already have this index edit endpoint. And this is, we're going to change it so the show page is just a way that users can read posts. So I don't want to have another way that users can edit things. So I'm just going to clean this up by getting rid of this, right? So basically what I'm doing is I'm taking the default LiveView stuff, everything that the live generator creates for us, I'm taking that as a default template. But you can see how now what I'm doing is I'm basically just cleaning it up to work for our use case. So it's not like it can generate your perfect application for you out of the box, but it gives you a lot of starter code that makes it really easy for us to modify and tweak this. And so I want to treat this show module as a way to just show the story without allowing to edit edit it or anything. This is going to be I'm turning it so this endpoint is a way that any user can read any other user's story, but they can only read it. They can't edit or delete it or anything of that nature. So I'm getting rid of the endpoint here that would have allowed editing of somebody else's endpoint. And I'm just going to clean up this module so that way we can just simply read it. So when I come here now, if I try to go to that endpoint, it no longer exists, so it'll be broken. And so on this endpoint, instead of having an edit page that clearly breaks, we're going to come into here where we have our show modules HEEX file, and we're just going to get rid of the pop-up modal that allows you to edit things, as well as the link to the route that now no longer exists. And then this subtitle will be, this is a story from a user from some user from, this could be like any user. This is a story from a user on our website. And that could be any user essentially. So it could be us that's allowed to read these or somebody else. And you can see all it's going to do is just have a title and a body that we can access the page. So let me go back. I'm in the show edit URL that I was demonstrating will break. So now let me go back here. And this is just going to be a way to read stories. And if I click back, we want this back button here. This is kind of subtle. This is the confusing thing. So where it says list in stories here, this is on our /stories endpoint. So let me clean this up. If we go to our index.html HEEX file here, where it says list in stories, let's change this to like edit my stories. And so this page now, this /stories page is now a place where I can edit my stories, which is the currently logged in user. And if I go to the home page, this is all user stories where you can read anybody's story, but you can't edit or delete them. And when we go back, we don't want to go back to where we edit our stories. We want to go back to the home page. So we're just going to change our show module here to now, or the show.html HEEX file. We're going to change it so that the back button is not to the stories endpoint. It's going to be to the home page endpoint. This will fix it up. So now when we go back, see we're on all user stories. We can read some other user stories and then go back to all the user stories. And what we need is, let me make this make more sense for you by adding some navigation, because this is starting to get a little bit confusing. So I'll make this very clear and easy for you right now. So under our blog web components, we have layouts and we have the root HTML HEEX. Now this file is where it contains the navigation stuff at the top of our page. So where it says here, it has the user's email, the settings, and the logout option. We can change this so that way it can also say, and you can also see here, it only displays this navigation if the current user variable is available, which means that this is only going to display here if the user is logged in. So when the user's logged in, what we're going to do is we're going to copy a couple of these endpoints, and we're going to have an endpoint that will say, that'll link to the home page. So this one can be home. And then we can change it so that we have the stories endpoint, and this can be called edit my stories. So if we create these two endpoints here, then what we can do, we have now on our page a home endpoint, and edit my stories endpoint. And this feels like it's making more sense now logically. So now we have a home page where we can read user stories. We go back to the home page. If we want to edit our own stories, we can come in here and we can edit just our stories. And we have the edit and delete option, as well as the ability to create new posts. So I can still create, so this is the newest post by test@test.com user. I'll save this story, and then I will delete one of my other stories. And I can also come in here and edit an existing story. So I'll just say edit. So all of these endpoints are still working. What I'll do now is I'll log out of our test@test.com user. So let's log out. And you can see here on the home page, we can still read everybody's read everybody's stories. Now, the reason we can do this is because, so this is one thing we need to fix here. So we can read everybody's stories. We want to be able to read everyone's stories because on medium.com, if I'm logged out here, it should not matter that I should still be able to see how I can still read a person's story. So even though I'm logged out, I should still be able to read other people's stories. So we want to still have this endpoint show on the home page where we can read other people's stories when we're logged out. But if I click in here to read it, it's throwing an error. That's a simple fix. We can just come into where our router is, and it looks like we're requiring authentication here on this endpoint. So we're just going to move this up to where we have our publicly accessible endpoints and put it in here. Come back to our page, and now when we click in to read a user's story, we can read their story. We can go back to the home page. We can read another user's story. We can go back to the home page. Now I can log in as that user. So now I'm logging in as the new user, and when I log in here, it brought me back to the endpoint I was previously at, but now I can go to edit my stories. I can see just my story, the one story that I have, and then here I can just click edit and I can edit my story, edit as new user, and then hit save. And then I can delete this if I wanted to, or create a new story altogether. And actually, it looks like we're having an issue here where we can't create the new user. So I'm logged in, and when I try to create a new story, it actually throws an error. So we're trying to access the stories/new endpoint. If we come back to our home page here, I move this route up here to the top. So /stories is catch-in /new endpoint. So what I need to do is I need to make sure that this /story/new endpoint gets hit before this other endpoint here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this here and delete this one. And I'm going to move it so that there's a publicly accessible endpoint that'll be hit after the new endpoint. So this way, when there's now a public endpoint for the show stories still, but when it's going through and it's trying to find a route that matches, it'll match the story's new route before it'll match the one where it's trying to set it up by ID. So if I come back here and I click new story, now it works again. And this is perfect. And we can save that. And then our other endpoint, which is where we can go to the stories with the ID, that'll still function. So if we go to stories and we were to go to story 11, so stories/11, then this will still open. So it's just making sure that the stories/new endpoint can be hit. Otherwise, this new keyword was getting, if this endpoint is before it, then when we pass new in here, it tries to match it to this endpoint. So order of precedence, basically, just making sure that this endpoint will get hit before this one. So that's a little bit of one of those gotchas to watch out for, but it's a good thing that we experienced it here, so that way you know that you don't want to have the keyword new mapped to what we're trying to capture our IDs into. And the way that you do it is just make sure the route that you just want to make sure that this route matches before the one where we would dynamically assign values here into the ID. Okay, so that'll fix that. Yeah, so we did a lot in this lesson. So play around and rewatch any parts of this video that you may have gotten you tripped up a little bit, because there was a lot of moving pieces. But essentially, to summarize what we've learned that there's now a home endpoint where we can list all of the user stories. There's also an edit page where we can edit just our stories. We can either create new stories, edit stories, or delete stories. And then so we can go, we can log out. And when we're logged out, we still have all of the stories publicly accessible so that they can simply be read by anybody that's on our site, similar to how medium.com works. All right, so that's it for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you over in the next lesson where we'll continue this application by building out comments and further cleaning up the functionality and the use cases here in our medium.com like clone.